There was a body carried back to Houston in April 1976, and at first, the men at the morgue could not be certain whose body it was. It belonged, they were told, to Howard Robard Hughes Jr., the aviator, the film producer, the billionaire, the man who had crossed the world in the sky and bought half a city from behind a locked door. And yet the body before them seemed to belong to another creature altogether. Wasted, bearded, scarcely 90 pounds, the hair and nails left to grow as though the body had been abandoned before death. He had once held the scepter of American modernity in his own hands. Oil, cinema, speed, flight, money, secrecy. He had built machines that seemed to defy the old laws of Earth. He had dated Hollywood women whose faces filled the darkened theaters of the world. He had owned an airline, a studio, hotels, casinos, and a defense company. And still, at the end, fingerprints were needed. Everyone remembered the glamour, the records, the planes, the fortune so large it seemed almost unreal. But beneath all of it was a quieter story, and a colder one, the story of a man who tried to control every surface of life until life itself became smaller than a room. This is the story of Howard Hughes, who flew higher than almost any man of his century and came down alone. Houston, Texas, in the first years of the 20th century, was a city of heat, oil talk, dust, and men who believed the earth might still be persuaded to give up its treasures. Into that world, on December 24, 1905, Howard Robard Hughes Jr. was born, the only child of Howard Hughes Sr. and Ellen Gano Hughes. The family was comfortable before it was rich. His father had the restless temperament of an oil man, the kind of man who looked at stubborn ground and saw not refusal, but an engineering problem. The tool that made the Hughes fortune was not a well, nor a field, nor a sudden gush of black oil. It was a bit of metal, a rotary drill bit that could chew through hard rock where older tools had failed. Howard Hughes Sr. did not merely make a tool. He made a system. The bit was leased, not sold. When the work was done, the bit returned. The patent stayed with the company. The money flowed back to Hughes' tool again and again, steady as a pump in the dark. That was the inheritance waiting for the boy. Yet childhood for Howard was not simply the beginning of wealth. It was the beginning of fear. His mother watched him closely. Too closely, perhaps. She worried over illness, germs, surfaces, breath, the invisible dangers that might pass from one child to another. Childhood disease was no small matter then. Mothers had reason to be afraid, and yet Aline's fear settled over her only son with a special weight. The world outside the house became not merely noisy or rough, but contaminated. He learned young that other people might carry danger on their hands. He was also partly deaf from childhood, afflicted by a hereditary condition that worsened over time. Conversation could be difficult. Crowds could be tiring. The human voice, that simple bridge between souls, did not always reach him cleanly. Machines were easier. Machines could be opened, examined, corrected, improved. By 11 or 12, he was building radio equipment. He made a transmitter from spare pieces and showed the patience of a child who preferred wires to playmates. When he wanted a motorcycle and could not have one, he fitted a motor to a bicycle. At 14, after an early airplane ride, he found the thing that would not leave him. Flight gave him what people did not: height, silence, distance. There were schools in California and Massachusetts. There was Rice Institute in Houston. There was a brief brush with the California Institute of Technology. None of it held him for long. Howard was not a boy made for classrooms. He was made for hangars, screening rooms, workshops, and locked offices where the ordinary rules might be kept outside. Then death came early. His mother died in 1922 when Howard was 16. His father died suddenly in January 1924. In less than 2 years, the overprotected child became an orphan with a fortune at his feet. He was 18, he was rich, he was not yet ready. A Houston judge declared him legally adult before he turned 21, and Howard moved to secure control of Hughes' tool. Relatives who might have shared power were bought out. The company that had been built by his father's drill bit became his. He had inherited not merely money, but a throne of machinery and patents, and he did not yet know what such power could do to a lonely young man. Soon, Houston was too small for him. Los Angeles in the 1920s was still inventing itself. It was not yet the polished Hollywood of memory, but a place of sets and dust, ambition and new money, directors shouting over cameras, young women changing their names, and men building private kingdoms out of light. Howard Hughes arrived there with a young wife, Ella Rice, and a fortune that allowed him to ignore the usual humiliations of beginning. He had no apprenticeship in cinema. He had no great reputation. He had instead a checkbook that could outlast embarrassment. His first attempts were uneven. Then came Two Arabian Nights, a silent comedy that brought an Academy Award for its director at the first Oscar ceremony. Hughes was still an outsider, but now he was an outsider with proof that money, stubbornness, and instinct could force open a door. He wanted more. The project that made his name was Hell's Angels, the great aviation war picture that combined his love of film with his hunger for flight. He hired pilots, bought aircraft, staged aerial sequences of extraordinary risk, and kept pushing for more spectacle, more danger, more perfection. When silent pictures gave way to sound, he chose not to retreat. He reshot large portions of the film. He replaced the leading lady and helped make Jean Harlow a star. Everything grew larger than planned. The costs, the delays, the dangers, the arguments. Men died in the making of it. Hughes himself took risks that another producer might have left to hired hands. And when the film finally appeared in 1930, it announced that he was not merely a rich young Texan playing at cinema. He was a man willing to spend almost anything to make the world look where he pointed. Then came Scarface, violent, bold, and troublesome to the senses. Hughes fought to bring it to the screen. Later, with The Outlaw, he would again turn censorship into publicity, building a film around Jane Russell and letting scandal do part of the work. He moved among actresses as he moved among projects, intensely, restlessly, often faithlessly. Katharine Hepburn, Ava Gardner, Jean Peters, and others passed through the long, unsettled weather of his affections. He could be lavish. He could be attentive. He could also be possessive, evasive, and difficult to leave behind. Ella Rice, his first wife, divorced him in 1929. Hollywood had claimed more of him than marriage did, and yet cinema was not the summit, it was the runway. In 1932, Hughes founded Hughes Aircraft Company. He hired engineers, argued over designs, and involved himself in the technical work with a seriousness that surprised those who had mistaken him for a dilettante. He wanted not merely to own airplanes, but to shape them. He wanted speed refined into metal. The H-1 racer gave him that. In 1935, he flew it to a world land plane speed record of about 352 miles per hour. In 1937, he crossed the United States from Los Angeles to Newark in 7 hours, 28 minutes, and 25 seconds. In July 1938, he flew around the world in roughly 91 hours. New York greeted him with a ticker tape parade. Crowds cheered the shy millionaire who had turned himself into a national hero. Medals followed, honor followed. The golden shadow of fame lay across him. For a brief time, Howard Hughes seemed to have solved the riddle of his own life. Machines obeyed him, money served him, the sky opened. And yet, even at the height, one thing had become clear. He could not bear to leave the controls in another man's hands. The first crack did not appear as ruin. It appeared as temperament. Howard Hughes had always wanted precision. In childhood, it had made him clever. In Hollywood, it had made him formidable. In aviation, it had made him dangerous in a way the public admired. A man who checked every measurement, who argued over rivets and drag, who refused half measures, such a man could break records. And yet there was another side to such precision. Those around him began to see rituals, the hand-washing, the repeated checking, the fear of contamination, the instructions that lengthened and hardened until ordinary tasks became ceremonies of avoidance. A can of food was not merely opened, it had to be opened correctly. A door handle was not merely touched, it was a threat to be managed. We have all known in smaller ways the person who tries to hold the world together by arranging the table just so. With Hughes, the table kept widening until it contained companies, aircraft, women, governments, and rooms no one was allowed to enter without permission. The pressure upon him increased during the war years. Hughes' aircraft took on military work. The government wanted aircraft parts, weapons components, and new machines. Hughes pursued enormous projects, among them the XF-11 reconnaissance plane and the giant flying boat that would become known, much to his irritation, as the Spruce Goose. He delayed, he altered, he refined, he interfered. Some of this was genius. Some of it was paralysis wearing a fine coat. There were crashes before the great crash. He survived more than once when survival seemed a generous thing. At Lake Mead, while testing a Sikorsky amphibian aircraft, the plane went down and 2 men aboard were killed. Hughes survived with an injury to his head. Each escape added to the legend, but also to the toll. His romantic life gave no rest. His first marriage had ended. The women of Hollywood came and went, often in pain and disorder. There were quarrels, jealousies, breakings off, returns. He pursued beauty, but beauty did not soothe him. It rarely does, when the wound lies elsewhere. By the mid-1940s, Hughes had wealth, companies, an airline interest, Hollywood power, and military contracts. He had also begun to retreat inward. The old confidence had not vanished, but something more brittle had entered it. The fall did not happen in one day. Such things seldom do. They begin as habits, then become needs, then become walls. And still, he climbed into the cockpit. July 7th, 1946. Beverly Hills in summer, the light hard and bright over the houses, the fairways green below, the air carrying the dry shimmer of Los Angeles heat. Above it, Howard Hughes sat at the controls of the XF-11, a reconnaissance aircraft built under wartime contract. It was a test flight. For roughly 45 minutes, the machine held. Then oil began to leak. A propeller malfunctioned and reversed its pitch. Drag seized one side of the plane. The aircraft pulled hard and began to lose altitude. Hughes tried to reach the Los Angeles Country Club. The fairway was open ground. A pilot's mind, in those seconds, became mathematics, instinct, and prayer without words. He did not reach it. The XF-11 struck houses in Beverly Hills and came down in fire. The wreckage burned. Hughes was pulled out alive, but only just. His chest was crushed. His lung collapsed. He suffered burns and broken bones. The impact damaged him terribly. Doctors were not sure he would live. He lived. That was the mercy, and perhaps also the beginning of the punishment. The pain remained. To manage it, doctors gave him codeine. In later years, other drugs entered the pattern. Medication that had first arrived as relief became part of the architecture of his decline. The body that had carried him through speed records and cockpit danger now demanded tribute every day. And that was the moment the Scepter slipped. Not before the cameras, not in a Senate hearing, not in a boardroom. It slipped in the wreckage of a plane he had insisted on flying himself. Soon after, while still marked by injury, Hughes faced public scrutiny over wartime contracts. Senator Owen Brewster led an investigation into money spent on aircraft that had not reached the war in operational form. Hughes appeared before the committee and fought back fiercely. He accused Brewster of serving the interests of Pan American Airways, a rival to TWA. He was combative, precise, and unwilling to bow. For one more moment, the old Hughes seemed present. He could still command a room. Then came Long Beach Harbor, November 2nd, 1947. Before watchers who doubted the great wooden flying boat would ever leave the water, Hughes climbed aboard the H-4 Hercules. Its wingspan was vast, its engines were many. Its usefulness had already been questioned. It had become a public joke as much as a machine. He taxied it. Then he lifted it. For about 1 minute, the vast aircraft rose above the harbor. It flew roughly a mile, low over the water, then settled back down. It never flew again. The gesture ended one argument, but it did not restore what had been lost. The crash had changed the terms of his life. From then on, pain, medication, secrecy, and compulsion would travel with him. The sky had not rejected Howard Hughes. His own body had. After the crash, Hughes did not immediately vanish. Lives of this sort often keep their old shape for a while after the center has cracked. The suits are still pressed. The signatures still move money. The public still remembers the hero and does not see the private negotiations being made with pain. He took control of RKO Pictures in the late 1940s, and the result was disorder wrapped in authority. He interfered with production, dismissed executives, delayed films, and left people waiting while he reconsidered decisions no one else could make for him. The studio survived him, but not well. He sold it after years of damage and walked away with profit while the old machinery of the place stood weakened behind him. In 1953, he created the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Its future importance would be far greater than many could then have imagined. At the time, it sat within the broader pattern of his business arrangements, tax considerations, and corporate maneuvers. Strange how often the thing that lasts is not the thing a man loved most. In 1957, he married Jean Peters. She had been an actress, and she had known him when the world still attached glamour to his name. Their marriage did not become a household of warmth and daily companionship. It unfolded largely at a distance, through intermediaries, telephone calls, separations, and silence. Whether the legal end was placed in 1970 or 1971, the emotional distance had long since done its quieter work. Then came one of the most disturbing episodes of his withdrawal. He entered a darkened screening room on Sunset Boulevard and remained there for months. He watched films. He sat for long stretches in the dark. He communicated through handwritten notes. Food was simple and strange. His hygiene deteriorated, even as his fear of germs intensified. Those two facts, placed side by side, were among the saddest contradictions of his life. The man, terrified of contamination, became surrounded by neglect. He moved into hotels. The Beverly Hills Hotel became one of his refuges. Business was conducted by phone and memo. His handwriting carried instructions for vast sums and tiny rituals with equal intensity. He had once worked over aircraft designs because speed demanded precision. Now, precision had turned inward, fastening itself to tissues, utensils, light, food, and the handling of objects. It is the part of these stories we want least to hear, fellow travelers, the part where power does not disappear, but shrinks. The command remains, yet the kingdom narrows until it is only a chair, a curtain, a bottle, a locked door. In 1966, Hughes sold his controlling stake in TWA for a sum that made him a billionaire and one of the richest men in America. He could have gone anywhere. He chose Las Vegas. He arrived at the Desert Inn around Thanksgiving, carried in by aides, taken through service entrances, installed on the upper floors. When the hotel owners eventually wanted him to leave, he bought the hotel. The price was $13.25 million. It was a sentence only Howard Hughes could write with money. I will not move. The building will move around me. Then the buying continued. The sands, the frontier, the castaways, the landmark, the silver slipper, purchased in part because its rotating neon sign disturbed him from across the way. The sign was turned off. He bought land, a local airline, mining claims, and a television station so the screen could obey him at any hour. More than $300 million went into Las Vegas properties over 4 years. His presence helped change the city, drawing it away from old mob structures and toward corporate ownership. Yet he did not walk the casino floors. He did not sit among gamblers, inspect the tables, or look out at the strip he was remaking. Robard Hughes became his public instrument in Nevada. Other aides guarded the private rooms. Many were Mormon men, valued by Hughes for habits that excluded alcohol and tobacco. Access narrowed. The circle tightened. The billionaire became less a man than a voice behind doors. The empire remained vast. The man within it had become hollow. And in November 1970, he left Las Vegas in secret. The departure from Las Vegas was carried out at night. Howard Hughes was taken from the Desert Inn and flown away without public farewell. Robard Hughes, who had managed his Nevada world, was removed. John Peters was not told in any ordinary manner that her husband had left the country. The marriage, already distant, moved toward its legal end. The Bahamas came first. Hughes occupied the upper floor of the Britannia Beach Hotel. The rooms were arranged around rules. Windows were sealed, light was blocked. A chair sat within a boundary of tissues and paper towels, as though a fragile border could still protect him from the world. The instructions continued. Aides handled food, utensils, doors, papers. Objects had to be prepared before crossing into his space. He watched films repeatedly. One film, Ice Station Zebra, was said to have held him again and again. The glow of the screen replaced the sun. Then Nicaragua. In December 1972, he was in the Intercontinental Hotel in Managua when an earthquake tore through the city. The hotel survived, though shaken. Thousands outside were not so fortunate. Hughes was carried down and flown away. There was London, there was Vancouver, there was Acapulco. Different countries, different hotels, yet the room remained much the same. Covered windows, a chair, notes, needles, milk, ice cream, chicken, and long periods of not eating. He stopped bathing. His teeth darkened. His body thinned. Codeine remained close. In 1972, when Clifford Irving claimed to have produced an authorized autobiography of Hughes, the hidden man briefly became a voice again. He spoke by telephone to journalists who had known him, denying the fraud. The hoax collapsed. It was one of the last times the public heard him with certainty. Even in absence, his name still moved through history. In the 1970s, the CIA used the Hughes name as cover for the Glamour Explorer project, a deep-sea operation tied to the recovery of part of a sunken Soviet submarine. It suited the world's idea of him, an immense, improbable engineering venture attached to a man no one expected to see. That was the peculiar power left to him. He had vanished, but his name still opened doors. His body, meanwhile, continued its quiet surrender. Broken needle tips were later found in his arms. Kidney failure would be named as the cause of death, with dehydration, emaciation, and drug use forming the dreadful company around it. On April 5, 1976, Howard Hughes was being flown from Acapulco to Houston for medical treatment. He died in the air. He was 70 years old. There was no wife beside him, no child, no public farewell, no final speech from the man who had once faced senators and crowds. Only the aircraft, the body, the men attending him, and the shadow of Houston waiting below. The final journey ended where the fortune had begun. After death, Howard Hughes controlled nothing. No valid will was accepted. The estate, valued around $2 billion to $2.5 billion, became a battlefield of lawyers, cousins, alleged heirs, and papers that could not carry the weight placed upon them. More than 40 alleged wills appeared, hundreds came forward. In time, the estate passed among cousins, distant blood returning to claim what intimacy had long since abandoned. There was a strange justice in that, though not a neat one. Hughes had spent his life narrowing trust until almost no one could stand near him. Then, after all of it, strangers and distant relatives gathered around the remains of the fortune like men examining a wreck. Some things vanished. The airline passed into history. The studio was gone. The desert inn was torn down. The famous drill bit patent expired. The great wooden flying boat survived behind glass, enormous and still, as if waiting for a second flight that never came. And yet something remained. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute endured and grew into a major force in biomedical research. The man who feared illness, contamination, and bodily decay left behind an institution that funded the study of life itself. There was melancholy in that, and a faint irony too quiet to laugh at. We watch these lives, and something stirs in us. Not judgment exactly, perhaps recognition, perhaps unease. A man may conquer distance and still not cross the small room between himself and another human being. Howard Hughes had been many men: orphan, heir, husband, lover, producer, pilot, engineer, recluse. The world remembered the records because records have numbers, and numbers make memory easy. But the life itself was less tidy. It was speed and fear, courage and compulsion, mastery and imprisonment. At the beginning, he had wanted height. At the end, he wanted only the room controlled. And somewhere between the two, the palace went silent, the throne stood empty, and the fallen scepter lay where no hand could reach it. If you found yourself in this story, even for a moment, you may find yourself in the next one too. Subscribe to The Fallen Scepter and stay with us. There are many more lives to remember.